Ms. Kessel, would you give us your full name for the record, please?
Ursula Kessel.
And do you wish to affirm or take an oath?
Affirm. I, Ursula Kessel, sincerely declare and affirm that the evidence that I give to this Commission shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Thank you, Ms. Kessel. Please sit down. Mr. Gandy.
May it please the Commission appear for Ms. Kessel. Ms. Kessel, you prepared a statement dated 22nd of September in response to a summons dated 9th of September.
Yes.
Is that right? Do you see a copy of the statement on the screen?
Yes.
The reference to the top is CRW 998020723. Is that the first page of the statement?
No, 721.
Apologies, 721. Could we go to the last page of your statement, which is the next page after this, 735, please? Is that a schedule to your statement, VK-1, that lists the number of documents that you looked at?
Yes.
Thank you. I understand you wish to make one amendment to your statement,
Yes.
paragraph 20, which is reference ending 07. Paragraph 20, please. That's
723.
723. What's the amendment you wish to make, Ms. Kessel?
Comes up on the screen. So,
Paragraph 20.
in brackets, it says against the unredeemed chip reports. I'd like to change unredeemed chip reports to chip accountability reports.
Sorry, could you repeat that, please?
Sure. Unredeemed chip reports in the brackets to change to chip accountability reports.
Subject to that amendment, is the statement true and correct, to the best of your knowledge and belief?
Yes.
Commissioner has attended that statement.
Thank you, Mr. Gandy. The witness statement of Ursula Kessel, dated the 22nd of September 2021, and bearing the identifier number CRW.998.002.072, with the amendment that Ms. Kessel has made to paragraph 20, is admitted into evidence as an exhibit. Mr. Futrell.
May it please the Commission. Ms. Kessel, my name is Michael Futrell. I'm one of the counsel assisting the Commission. I'm asking some questions. Can I just start with that the paragraph you just amended? I want to be quite clear I've got this right. I delete the word unredeemed, do I, so that the actual report is called the Chip Accountability Report.
Yes.
Thank you. While we are in your statement and on that page, can I ask that you go to paragraph 16, and in 15 and 16 you have dealt with training you've received in respect of AML and CTF.
Mm-hmm.
And in 16 you've made some references there to some training, other training. Are you able to provide the Commission with a more expansive explanation of the AML training in particular that you have received, other than the training you referred to in paragraph 15?
It was prior years. So the one in paragraph 15 has only up to a certain date. And going forward, there was, since I commenced, there was additional AML standard online training.
And is it only online training that you
Yes.
did? And how frequently did you do that online training?
I believe it's every 2 years.
And did you do it every 2 years?
Yes.
And approximately how long did it take you to complete the AML online training each second year?
I don't recall how long it would have taken me several years ago, but approximately 30 minutes.
And in general terms, what kinds of information did the online training give you about AML and CTF risk?
In relation to AML, it was threshold transactions, how to see suspicious activity on the gaming floor, what would be unusual activity on the gaming floor. The requirement to report for threshold transactions over 10,000.
And was there anything specifically dealing with transactions and suspicious matters?
It was transactions mainly through the cage, transactions or through the machines.
And what was the online training in respect of those transactions through the cage?
So if a patron came to the cage with over $10,000 in cash, a threshold transaction would be completed by the cage.
And what about sums less than 10,000?
Sums less than 10,000 only if there was suspicious behaviour in relation to the sums under 10,000. But
were there any examples given of the suspicious kinds of behaviour?
For example, going to the cage, maybe $5,000, going to the table, not actually transacting with the chips, going to another table and still not transacting, and cashing in the chips.
What of breaking up larger transactions into smaller transactions? Was there anything of that character in the online training?
I don't recall.
Did you receive any other either education or training in respect of AML and CTF risks in your education, as in when you were being educated as in your accounting and finance degree?
That I recall, no.
And what about during the course of your training to become a chartered accountant?
No, not that I recall.
Just another question that's really a matter of identifying, if you don't mind. This is in paragraphs 41 and 42 of the statement. And it's a reference to, you mentioned there the VIP credit team in paragraph 41. Who is the VIP credit team?
So the VIP credit team is mainly through Melbourne. It's a centralised area, and we would have a team member from VIP Credit in Perth.
And who's that?
It varied over time, but currently it's Maxine Kumoski.
Right. So, and what position is that? Does that person hold? Are they an accountant or?
No, they're credit officer.
Credit officer. And the balance of the teams in Melbourne, and how large is the team in Melbourne?
I'm not certain how large the team is in Melbourne.
All right. Can I ask that you? Now I want to ask you some questions about. You've answered. You recall you received with your sons a list of topics of various questions or topics for you to deal with. One of them is question 22, which I want to ask you. If I could just remind you of what the question was. So this is PCRC.0001.0002.001. And I just ask if you can confirm you remember seeing you've received this recently, and this is what you used to prepare your statement.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I just ask you if we could scroll for you've beaten me there. Well done. To 22. And you'll see the question was directed to from the time of, or the period of your employment, including any changes there may have been from time to time, the knowledge of the inward and outward telegraphic transfers. In your statement in these paragraphs in 48 onwards, you've dealt specifically with, I think, the position as it stands now, as of 2020, October 2020. I'd like, if I may, to take you back and ask you to consider what the position may have been some time before that, and primarily in the period between 2013 and 2020. And could I ask, I take it you were familiar in the finance area with the casino control manual, casino manual operations?
During that time,
Yes?
not that familiar with the casino control manual. Manual.
Were you familiar with the section dealing with main bank?
No, I wasn't familiar.
You were not?
No.
And what about the telegraphic transfer operating procedures?
I'm only familiar more recently.
There were aspects of those procedures, though, that the finance department dealt with, were there not?
I'm not sure. I'm not
Well,
familiar
how
with
about I
the
take you to if I could begin just by asking you some questions. It may be that you will know the answer to these in any event. So if I could just start by taking you to the section 3A main bank, which is CRW.707.016.1939. This is a non-publication order on this document. Sorry, my iPad's having a problem, so I'll have to try and work off the screen. If we could scroll, please, to the page number I don't have, but it's section 4.7.1 in the. You could just perhaps scroll to the next page, which will show the first page of the keep going, sorry. If we could now move to section 4.7.1. Thank you. Are you familiar with these parts of the main bank section of the casino manual?
No, I'm not familiar.
All right, we scroll to 4.8.1 and the area dealing with receipt of deposits. Are you familiar with that section?
No, I'm not familiar with reading that section previously.
Any of these sections?
No.
All right. Perhaps we could move through then to 4.11. Which deals with telegraphic transfers. And if I could just draw your attention on the second of those pages to item 6. Where it makes reference to the quadruplicate being forwarded to finance. Were you familiar with that part of the procedure?
I'm familiar with that. I'll just read it. 2 seconds. not familiar with the number of duplicates, but I'm familiar with the TT, the telegraphic transfer form.
All right, it might be easier, I think, if we just take you straight to the standard operating procedures from this time, which is CRW.529.001.9093. And in your statement, you've made some reference to a document referred to as a release of telegraphic transfer to patrons.
Mm-hmm.
Do you recall being familiar with this telegraphic transfer standard operating procedure at some point in the time you've been?
No, I'm not familiar with this document.
At all?
No,
Have you seen it before?
it's a cage document by the title. No, I haven't.
All right. Were there standard operating procedures for the receipt of telegraphic transfers for the finance department in this period?
What period?
In 2013?
No.
So is the document you've referred to in your statement at paragraph 48 the only one there has been since you've been working in finance?
Yes.
So it's the first one
That's been written. Yes.
It's been written. Do you recall from the time you were working in the finance department what the procedure was that you utilised when dealing with telegraphic transfers before 2020 and the procedure was written?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Are you familiar with the procedure before you wrote it in 2020?
I was familiar with what we did from my point of view in relation to the transfer.
All right, and so was that procedure in a similar of a similar nature to the procedure as it is today?
There's additional items on. There's additional requirements in the procedure than there was previously.
Okay, right. I just want to take you through the mechanics of it. Was it the case in 2013 to 2020 that a copy of the document you've identified as the requisition to release deposit funds at Cage was provided to the finance department?
It was provided to the finance department, yes.
And was it the case that attached to that document were the validating documents, to say receipts or extracts from the bank statements and that sort of thing that indicated what the nature of the source of the funds was and the patron?
I'm not familiar with what was attached to the form.
All right, perhaps I'll show you a document, which is CRW.510.135.0190. Now, you worked in the finance area for some time.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
There appear to have been two areas in the finance department that received copies of this requisition to release form. One is someone referred to as a telegraphic transfer officer, or words to that effect. Are you familiar with that?
Not familiar with that term, no.
What about the income control?
Income control, yes.
All right, now income control, what was their function?
Income control would enter the transactions into the system, into the accounting system, and they would check the documentation.
Is there a non-publication order on this? Okay. You should have in front of you on your screen. Now we've asked for these to be produced back in 2013, but so far we've only got a sample,
Mm-hmm.
and we've got an example here from 2017. Is that the form to which you've made reference in your statement?
Yes,
All right. Now, it contains a number of some information about the requisition. Now, in your time in the finance department, are you familiar with this form? Have you seen it and used it yourself in carrying out functions in finance?
not to carry out my role, no.
Have you participated in the income control function?
No.
Have you supervised people who participate in that area?
Supervise. The manager reports to me.
So, are you aware of what material they receive on a daily basis to carry out their role in the finance department?
Not fully, no.
Have you had an occasion to review documents like this in the past?
No.
Sorry, the manager of which team reports to you?
Income control?
Are you unable to assist the Commission at all with respect to this document and the attachments to it? So if I take you to the
See the
attachments,
attachment.
which are on the following page, there's three attachments which are bank statements or extracts from a bank statement for the Riverbank investments account.
No, not familiar with this form of download from the bank statement.
Well, you've written a standard operating procedure that's current today, haven't you?
Yes,
And that standard operating procedure deals with how the income control function of finance is to record transactions referred to in a requisition to release form, an incoming deposit, doesn't it?
yes,
All right. This is referred to in your statement, Ms. Kessel. So this document is CRW.700.025.1546. Bearing in mind this is the current procedure, I want to ask you some questions. If I understand, you are the author, or you drafted this procedure
with assistance.
with assistance. Can I draw your attention to on the first page it refers to patron receipts. There's a
Yes.
paragraph that begins, Cage downloads the bank statements on a daily basis and reviews, etc. And then there's a third bullet point that says, forward the blue copy of the requisition to release deposit funds at Cage to income control.
Yes,
And then income control will complete various things, and it refers to, on receipt of that form, it will check to ensure the TT is not aggregated.
yes,
Now, the way in which the finance income control department checks to see that it's not aggregated is it has regard to the validating materials attached to the requisition to release form. Correct?
no, for my purposes, it would be when they get to the point that they review the bank statements to make sure all the transactions are in there, that they note at that stage that it's not aggregated, because I wasn't fully aware that the bank statement was attached behind the requisition. Or requisition.
All right. So income control's function has not changed since 2013, has it, in this respect?
That is a new section
All right. But
in
in terms,
relation to aggregation.
if you focus on the part that says income control will complete the following, it is making journal entries as a consequence of transactions that have taken place in the bank account of Crown Perth.
Sorry,
So-
could we just have up on the screen the relevant portion of the document you're referring to?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm now there's 2 bullet points under income control will complete the following.
Thank you.
Now, I appreciate this is the procedure today with respect to the first part of the bullet point, but it's always been the case, hasn't it, that the income control entered a journal entry in the general ledger for the debit to the gaming bank account and credit to the patron deposit.
Yes.
All right. So in the past, in order to make that entry, what information did the finance department have available to it?
They would have had the documents from Cage and the bank statements.
Right. So they had the bank statements and the documents from Cage. Now, can I ask you, when that entry is made in terms of debiting the gaming bank account, is that an entry that is made for each individual deposit that's been made into the bank account?
Prior to December 20 or currently?
Let's start with prior.
So prior, they would have taken the amount off the TT, off the form. So it would have been a consolidated figure. So they wouldn't have entered the individual items as per the bank statement.
Okay. So when it came to identifying, let's say that there was a consolidated sum of 100,000 and it was made up of a number of smaller amounts, the person entering the consolidated sum into the gaming bank account for the gaming bank account details must have had to know what disaggregated amounts made up that larger sum. Correct? And so what information did they have available to them to identify the individual deposits that made up the consolidated sum?
I'm unsure what they would have had from the Cage, but the bank statement would have had the individual amounts on it.
Right, so they would have had the requisition to release form and whatever was attached to that
Yes,
by Cage.
yes,
And in order for the journal entry to be made, the income control person in finance would need to be satisfied that the amounts were correctly recorded in the requisition to release form
yes,
and that the individual deposits were correctly allocated to that form.
yes, they match, yes.
That's right. So if there was not a match, what would the outcome be? If, for example, the person in finance determined that they could not find an appropriate voucher attached to the requisition to release form to correlate with the aggregated sum, what would be the outcome in that situation?
As I haven't done the role myself, I can only assume they'd speak to Cage to determine why there was a difference.
What I'm asking you is part of the role of the income control department was to validate the transactions, correct? To be satisfied that the appropriate records had been completed by the Cage in order for the accounts to be correctly prepared. You're nodding.
Yes, I can understand, yes.
That was their function, wasn't it? Part of their function.
Yes,
So if for example, the form had been incorrectly completed, it wasn't signed by the right person, so it wasn't essentially a valid transaction, they would have made an inquiry, correct?
unsure about the signature, but if the dollars did not match, they should contact the Cage.
Okay. There's also in that second bullet point in reference to the main bank control sheet and a reference to Psycho and a journal. There are 2 other journal entries there. There is the patron deposit account and Cage funds. Is that a ledger that deals with tracking the patron's individual allocation of the front money? Is that? what the purpose of that journal is?
The journal is to recognise the deposit from the patron into that general ledger account. Not
I'm just saying that, so you debit the game, I'm just looking, there's two different records here. One's debiting the gaming bank account,
mm-hmm.
and you're crediting a patron deposit. So you're recognising the money has come from a patron.
Yes, it's
In the next entry, what is the purpose of that? You're dealing with
clearing the above transaction is credit patron deposit, and the next transaction clears it out of the patron's deposit and into cage funds.
all right. So by those two steps, in effect, you are crediting the cage with the funds that have been deposited by the patron.
Yes, because it commenced.
And is that process essentially the same process that has been undertaken by the income control for the time you've been in finance?
That's my understanding, yes.
And the second step, which is the releasing the funds to the cage, at what point does that take place? When do they become effectively available for gaming purposes at the cage?
I'm not certain at what point in the cage.
Well, is it the case that this is happening, if you like, after the event? So after the patrons arrived, they've arrived in the cage and said, I'd like to start gaming now, I want some chips. And this is happening post-event as part of the administration of the accounts? Or is it a step that must take place before the patron would be able to start gaming?
The accounting entry could happen at any point after.
I see.
Yeah.
So is the driving mechanism for whether the funds become available the requisition to release form?
The forms, yes, received.
Sorry, received by whom?
By income control. To do the journal entry.
So can the funds be released before income control do its bit?
Yes,
So the whole process can occur at the cage, and then after that, income control.
the accounting can occur afterwards.
Right, thank you.
Now, I appreciate you're now dealing with, again, the current. I'm focusing on inward funds, not the outward requisitions at the moment. I appreciate you're dealing here with the current process, I believe. So in paragraph, I think it's 58, in paragraph 58, you have there, if Cage requests finance to reject a deposit for not meeting Crown's deposit guidelines, then it is the finance team's responsibility to contact the relevant bank, etc. What do you mean by that statement, if Cage requests finance to reject the deposit, given...
Sorry, I'm a bit Scott Melanie's.
Yes, I think we've got a different statement.
Oh, we've got the wrong statement. So this is CRW 0.998.002.0721 at pinpoint 0728. So if you just read that paragraph, my question really is, what exactly does that mean?
So currently, if Cage sees on the bank statement an inward transaction and it doesn't meet the guidelines, for example, being from a third party, or the description doesn't have the patron ID in the description, Cage will request finance to return the funds.
Right. So it's essentially the opposite then. It's the other way around. It's if you receive the requisition form and it appears to have something wrong with it. For example, doesn't meet the guidelines. It's a third party, not the patron. Then you instigate a process by which the funds are returned to the party who deposited them, the third party.
We would organise the bank to send the
Yes.
funds back. We might not receive the requisition if it's not been accepted.
All right. Now, in the past, and I'm now talking about before you wrote the SOP and before the procedures changed to preclude third-party deposits, there was a period of time during which there was nonetheless a prohibition on companies depositing funds with the casino unless there was an appropriate authority given. In the circumstances where a deposit was received by the finance department from, say, for example, a company without the requisite authority, is the process you've just described the same that would have taken place before 2020?
No.
And why is that? If the finance department received a deposit that was inconsistent with a company policy, why would it not then have raised that with the Cage?
Firstly, it's Cage who would request the return. In relation to the company, finance would not be aware of the investigation in relation to the deposit that Cage had made.
But if for example, the requisition to release form arrives, it's from a third party or a company, not the patron identified in the requisition to release form, and there is not attached to that form the required authority from the CFO or whoever the required person was, wasn't it part of the function of income control to check to ensure the procedures had been met before recognising the deposit in your accounts?
No.
And why was that not part of its function?
Finance would, if the requisition did arrive, finance would assume that all the checks and balances by Cage would have been completed.
So there was no validation on your evidence of transactions transacting the Cage by the time they reached the finance department.
Sorry.
You weren't undertaking any validation role at the time the finance department, income control, was dealing with requisition to release forms from the Cage.
Not in relation to the company.
So you were not, in other words, I just want to be clear about this, Ms. Kessel, you were not considering the requisition to release form from the perspective of whether it conformed with the company policy.
No.
And is that the case today?
Yes.
So the situation as we sit here today is that when requisition to release forms are received by income control, the person who is entering the details into the accounting system is not checking those forms to see that they conform to the telegraphic transfer policy of the company.
Yes.
I think you may have answered my the next question, which is directed actually to paragraph 59D of your witness statement. Well, in fact, you may not have actually answered this one. I think I now understand how income control dealt with the ledgers. What, in 20D, you've made reference there to reconciling general ledger accounts. The reconciliation process involves some form of checking, doesn't it?
It would check that the balances either reconciled to a report or to the bank statements.
You wouldn't be checking it. So is the effect of that answer, you're not checking every individual transaction, you're checking the balances match?
Correct.
And if there's an error in the balance, you then chase the rabbits down the holes to find out why. Okay. In two places in paragraph 62, you have mentioned some accounts that were held with the HSBC before 2013, and I think you've made reference into paragraph 70 to accounts in the name of Riverbank, and you know I'm referring to Riverbank Investments, obviously.
Sorry.
You're familiar with the
Yes.
name Riverbank Investments. Now, Riverbank Investments had accounts with the HSBC in 2013, didn't it?
That's what I recall, yes.
And they were closed as a consequence of a strategic review undertaken by the HSBC to exit the gaming sector globally.
That's my understanding.
And you had some interactions at that time with the HSBC Bank, did you not, about the closure?
I don't recall, but I did see the documents attached.
You've been shown some documents since you prepared your statement that indicate you received a letter from the HSBC, but you don't have any recollection of receiving it.
No.
Did you have an understanding in 2013 of why HSBC was exiting the gaming sector globally?
No.
But after that, you were involved in setting up some accounts with the ANZ Bank?
Yes.
For Riverbank Investments?
Yes.
Yes, and you were a signatory on those accounts?
Yes.
And they were established in the name of both Burswood Nominees and Riverbank Investments?
Yes.
And at least some of those accounts were for the purposes of gaming, patron deposits for gaming?
All of them, if I remember correctly.
All of them. Let's be clear, when you say all of them, do you mean all of those associated with Riverbank Investments?
And Burswood Nominees.
And Burswood Nominees, I see. Did Burswood Nominees, to your knowledge, have any other accounts?
Yes.
So, let's just say, more non-patron gaming accounts?
Non-gaming accounts, yes.
And what about Riverbank Investments?
No.
All right, so as far as you were aware, was the only purpose of the Riverbank Investments account to receive funds from patrons for gaming?
Yes.
And is it fair to say that the only activity of Riverbank Investments was to receive funds from patrons for gaming?
Yes.
And did you have an appreciation in 2013 of when the accounts were opened of the reason or need for Crown Perth to operate or receive funds from patrons for gaming in a separate legal entity, to say Riverbank Investments, as opposed to Burswood Nominees?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Did you have an understanding or appreciation of the reason for Crown Perth utilising a separate legal entity, namely Riverbank Investments, to receive funds from patrons for gaming?
No.
So, did it occur to you at the time it was an unusual thing to have a separate company named Riverbank Investments receiving funds from patrons for gaming?
Not that I recall, no.
And why did it not occur to you that that was unusual?
It was a historical account, had been there since I arrived.
Did you ask any questions of those who were supervising you?
Not that I recall.
It was intended, was it not, around this time to establish an account in the name of Riverbank Investments in Hong Kong?
Not that I recall.
All right. Could I ask that you be shown CRW.529.011.6113?
Can I just ask that any personal details of Crown staff be redacted on that document, please, if it's going to stay on public screens? Thank you.
I draw your attention to if we could scroll down, please, operator, to the email that commences 28 October 2013. Reference is account opening with ANZ Hong Kong. Hi Travis, etc. And then it's from you. Do you have any recollection of attempting to open an account for Riverbank Investments in Hong Kong at this time?
No, I don't recall. No, I don't recall the Hong Kong currency maybe, but not country.
In the course of opening accounts, was it part of your responsibilities to gather the necessary documentation together to provide to the bank, so the account opening forms and any authorities?
Collect the paperwork in relation to setting up a bank account. Yes.
I just asked then you'd be shown CRW.505.002.006. Have you seen that document previously?
No, only part of the documentation we received.
So you've seen it before you came in
No.
to give your evidence today, or
No.
not? Do you recall having seen it in or about 2013
No,
as part of a suite of documents to open an account in Hong Kong?
no, I don't recall that document.
All right. Was an account opened for the Riverbank Investments company in Hong Kong, to your knowledge?
Not that I recall.
Okay. Now, can I just draw your attention to paragraph 74 of your statement? You're dealing with some matters in the early part of 2014. And you have made reference there to receiving an email from Mr. Costin. Can I show you CRL, sorry, 0.563.004.6311. Ms. Kessler, this is a different document reference to the one referred to in your statement, but I think it's possibly the same document. that is the email referred to in your paragraph 74 of your statement, isn't it?
Yes,
Okay. Now, do you recall receiving it at about, in the early part of 2014, now you've had time to reflect on it?
I vaguely recall the email.
When you say you vaguely recall it, is one of the reasons you have a recollection of it is because it raises a matter of some serious concern for the ANZ about the operation of the ANZ account?
No, I just remember the setup of the email for some reason, the way the questions were down the bottom. I don't recall what was in the email.
Do you have a recollection of understanding the ANZ to be raising questions about, in effect, possible structuring through the ANZ Riverbank account?
I don't recall.
You'll notice that the email was addressed, although it's been blacked out, to both you and Mr. Craig Spence. And Mr. Spence, you were reporting to Mr. Spence at the time, were you not? Do you recall having any discussions with him about the contents of this email?
I don't.
Did you receive any further information from Mr. Costin about the nature of these transactions?
No, I don't recall.
Can I ask, just in case this may refresh your memory, if you could be shown CRL.557.001.0718. This is not an email addressed to you, Ms. Kessel. And the attachment to it, which is CRL.557.001.0721.
Just while that document's coming up, there does appear to be potentially the depositor's information on the deposit slips, if that can be redacted, please. Or
I think the preference would be for this to remain non-public, so that we can see the full details.
Sorry, Commissioner.
Commissioner, if this could be shown just to the commissioners and
Yes.
the witness rather than the public, so we can actually use it.
That appears to have been done.
Thank you. Ms. Kessel, were you provided with a copy of this document amongst the materials before you came to give evidence today?
Yes,
And-
last night.
And having looked at it before you came in, is it a document that you can remember having received in the early part of 2014?
Don't recall this document at all.
Is the best evidence you're able to give this commission you don't have no recollection of receiving this in 2014?
No recollection of this document.
Could I ask that you be shown operator, you'll need to black out the personal details again. This is CRL.557.001.0911. This is non-publications. Why is that? Okay. Again, this is not an email that was sent to you, but I would like to draw your attention to the about the middle of the page. There's an email from Mr. Costin to Mr. Barton starting Ken, I've spoken to Craig, and there's a paragraph there. Do you recall whether you had an appreciation and understanding at the time of what the nature of the transactions, the subject of ANZ's inquiries were?
Not the transactions, no. Don't recall.
Does this paragraph here accord with your recollection of any of discussions you had at the time with Mr. Spence?
I don't recall having any discussions.
Could you just read that paragraph? Does that accord with your recollection of the way in which accounts operated by Crown Perth at the time utilised money changes?
Can you ask the question again?
Well, were you aware in 2013 that funds were received into the Riverbank investments account through the use of money changes?
I don't recall.
You don't recall being aware of it in 2014?
No, I don't recall the money changes, no.
Were you aware that funds were received into the Riverbank investments account at any time between 2013 and 2020 from non-ADI, meaning non-authorised deposit institutions, into the Riverbank investments accounts?
I don't specifically recall, no.
You don't specifically recall? Do you
No.
have any recollection at all?
I'm familiar with the term money changes, but I don't recall the transactions or...
Was it not common knowledge within the finance department that funds were received from third-party money changes in Southeast Asia?
Not that I recall.
You became aware around this time, did you not, that the ANZ intended to close the Riverbank investments accounts?
Yes,
And you were involved at the time in approaching the CBA to open new accounts for Riverbank investments?
was not. Don't recall being involved with approaching CBA, no.
Were you involved in the process by which the accounts were opened?
Been involved with the administration or the paperwork.
The administration and paperwork?
Yep.
You were?
Yes.
You do recall that?
Not specifically.
Right. But you know you were because you've read the documents, is that the...
Yes.
I see. Do you have a recollection of having some discussions with Ms. van der Klaw in the first half of 2014 about the ANZ inquiries?
No, I don't recall that meeting.
You don't recall having a meeting with her?
No, I've only seen the documents as per what was provided. No, I don't recall the meeting.
So you don't have any recollection of any discussions with her in around March 2014?
No, I don't.
You have seen the document she prepared for Mr. Preston?
Only what was provided through the documents here.
And you read that before today, did you?
No, I
No, what I
Don't
mean to
recall.
say is you received it as part of a package of documents in preparation for giving your evidence today.
yes,
And when you read through it, was that note I'm referring to, was it a document you can recall having seen in 2014?
I didn't completely read it, but no, that document definitely did not look familiar to me.
And when you read through it, did the information in it accord with your recollection of the way in which the accounts were operated in 2014?
I didn't completely read the document. I just skimmed through to look at it and noticed that I've never seen it, that document. Well, don't recall receiving that document before.
All right. Well, could I CRW.529.001.9091, please? I could just ask you to consider under the heading account structure, current account structure. Was that a matter of which you had direct knowledge in 2014?
Paragraph 1, are you referring to?
Yes.
Apart from the held in Melbourne, yes.
So So is that consistent with your memory of the way in which the accounts were structured in 2014?
Yes.
And under the heading account purpose? The first two bullet points in particular.
Yes.
All right. And then can I ask you just to look, there's another heading, patron accounts, and there's a heading overview of channeling employed to collect funds from patrons, and there are 3 bullet points. Again, is that consistent with your recollection of how these accounts were operated in 2014?
Not familiar with the part, don't recall the section on money changes or through the Overseas Crown Office.
I see. Is that something you think would have been information available to those in the cage rather than finance? Is that? And what about the heading 2, cash deposits over the counter deposits?
Sorry, is that in this paragraph?
I'm asking you if that accords with your recollection of the way in which the accounts were operated in, or deposits were received in 2014.
Sorry, it's just coming up on the screen.
Oh, I'm sorry, my fault.
Once again, it says money changes.
So is the effect of that you had no knowledge in 2014 that money changers were depositing funds into Riverbank Investments?
I don't recall in 2014.
What about, if we could scroll down to heading 6, use of non-bank, non-ADI foreign exchange providers? Does that accord with your understanding in 2014?
Familiar with Crown Perth does EFTs from my bank account to the patron's overseas account.
Yes.
Not sure what the overseas officers would do.
And what about the first bullet point? Crown Perth does not use non-bank or non-ADI to send money overseas. Does that accord with your recollection?
That's my understanding. It's similar to the second paragraph. So it would only be transferred from our bank account.
Yes. I see. So you mean to say utilising the services of your bank?
Yes.
And 7, the second bullet point in 7, I think it's... Is that consistent with your recollection of how the accounts were reconciled by finance in 2014?
It depends what they mean by reconciled. So from reconciled is what we explained earlier in relation to checking the bank statements back to the balance of the general ledger. I'm not sure what they mean by cage reconciling.
Well, I'm going to put a hypothesis to you, and because I have the same question about the way this is phrased, which is why I drew your attention to it. Was it part of your role in finance to do what we might describe as a sweep, where when there were sufficient funds in the Riverbank investments account surplus, the surplus would be swept across into another operating account of Crown Perth?
Yes.
And was that part of your functions in finance?
Yes.
And as part of that process, was it necessary for you to have access to the online banking platform to do
Yes.
that? And in reviewing the online banking platform, was part of that function to consider the deposits into the account and what deposits into the account and transactions out of the account?
No.
Well, by what means did you then know there was a surplus to be transferred across into the main accounts then?
General, just the balance of the account. You
So-
didn't necessarily need to know what was in or out,
I
just the
see.
balance.
So you just periodically looked at the balance and went, that looks good.
Yep.
Did you
Yes.
have any idea at that time of what other what transactions may have been in the pipeline coming out of the account?
No.
So how did you determine how much to leave in the account after you swept the surplus? Was there a float you maintained or something?
No, there was no float, but we would always leave a sum of money in there.
And how did you determine the sum of money that you were going to leave there?
No particular process.
Did you, in the course of this, require the authority of anyone else, or was it something within your own, the scope of your own authority to do?
No, own authority to do.
Can I just ask while we're still in this document, there's another heading, KYC processes. And I think you have mentioned this already, but just to confirm, the last bullet point there, is that a matter that was within your knowledge in 2014?
Not familiar if it was in 2014. I am familiar that we were we couldn't accept fund from companies unless it was had their directorship was looked at. I don't know particularly what year that was.
So at some time before 2020, you became aware of that ability, subject to those conditions, to receive funds from companies.
That's my understanding, my recollection, yes.
Okay. Now, you're aware, obviously, that the ANZ account was closed and a CBA account was opened. Could I ask you to be shown CRW.529.011.1741? This email was an email sent in April of 2014 to, amongst others, you. Do you have a recollection of receiving that email?
No, I don't recall.
Can I draw your attention to the second last paragraph? you recall there being a concern within Crown Perth at the time that your bank accounts were going to become under scrutiny from AML legislation?
No, I don't recall.
Do you recall there being a concern about transactions under the $10,000 threshold, meaning even greater scrutiny?
No, I don't recall.
Is it the case, Ms Kessel, you're unable to assist the Commission at all with any recollection of events in March and April 2014 associated with the closure of the ANZ account?
No, apart from the fact that it was closed, no.
All right. You've mentioned in your statement receiving an email from Mr Costin on the 29th of April, which is, I'll give you the reference that we have been using, which is, again, different to the one in your statement, CRL.605.016.4170. It's a longer chain. It's the one you've referred to in your statement is just the one from Mr Costin to you. And I will just direct your attention to that part of this one, which is at the bottom of pinpoint 4170, top of pinpoint 4171. And I want to direct your attention to there's a paragraph that begins the closure of the Riverbank accounts was expected, etc. And then there's a reference to a sentence that says, can customers be advised by relevant people that multiple cash deposits in branch under $10,000 reporting threshold will not be accepted in the new CBA accounts, as we don't want this process to occur again with CBA in 6 months' time deciding to close Riverbank and South Africa accounts due to suspect transactions. Do you recall there being a process put in place at all after that event, after this email was received, whereby deposits under several deposits under $10,000 were not to be received into the Riverbank investments accounts?
No, I don't recall.
When you say you don't recall, is that because there was no such process put in place to your knowledge?
To my knowledge, I'm not familiar with the process.
Well, what I mean to say is, were you aware of any operating procedure or direction given to any person in Crown Perth after this email was sent to the effect that deposits, multiple deposits under $10,000 would not be received into Crown Perth patron accounts?
I'm not aware.
You're not aware?
No. Don't recall, no.
Did you prepare any instruction to the Finance Department account control indicating that as part of the procedures from that point onwards, multiple deposits under $10,000 would not be received into patron accounts?
I don't believe so, no.
Sorry, I've been asked.
I don't believe so, sorry. No, don't recall, no.
Is that a matter that was within the your authority as in the Finance Department?
Sorry,
To provide a direction to the income control to the effect that patrons who deposit multiple cash deposits under $10,000 would not have their funds accepted?
Sorry, I still don't quite understand.
Well,
what you're
in other
asking.
words, when the income control was receiving the requisition to receive funds, one of the things they would be on the lookout for is if there were multiple deposits under $10,000, and if so, they were not to accept the funds from the patron.
No, they weren't given that instruction. It's not Finance's responsibility to review the bank statements
So
for
who,
that manner.
who, in your view, had the responsibility to give effect to Mr. Costin's instruction in that email?
Cage.
And who at the time was the person responsible for cage procedures?
I'm not certain directly who's responsible for the procedures. The general manager of Cage and Count.
So whoever occupied the position of as General Manager of Cage and Count in April 2014 is, in your view, the person responsible for implementing any changes to the standard operating procedures at the time. Is that right?
I'm not certain if it's his responsibility, but it was David Brown.
But you said earlier that you thought that responsibilities for implementing the direction lay with Cage.
Yes.
And so who else other than the General Manager of Cage and Count had responsibility for the design of their standard operating procedures?
Would have been his cage management team as well. So I'm not familiar who directly was responsible.
Was there a person to whom Mr. Brown reported?
What year would that be?
2014.
April?
Yes,
That would have been Mr. Craig Spence,
I see.
if I remember correctly.
So is it the case that Cage and Finance fell under the management of the financial controller of Crown Perth, the Chief Financial Officer?
Chief Financial Officer, yes.
All right. Now, you knew, though, did you not, at this time, that Crown Perth had an obligation to detect, or at least assist in the detection and to report suspicious transactions to AUSTRAC?
Yes.
You must have known of that if for no other reason than the online training you had been doing periodically.
The online training is not specific in relation to bank accounts.
No, but you must have been aware, or you were aware, were you not, that there was an obligation on the part of Crown Perth to report suspicious transactions to AUSTRAC?
Yes.
And you understood, didn't you, that that responsibility lay with every employee of Crown Perth, not only the Cage, for instance?
Yes.
So any person within the organisation who identified a suspicious transaction of whatever character had an obligation to make a suspicious matter report, didn't they?
Or suspicious matter report. It may be a unusual activity report.
Well, the unusual activity report's a more recent invention,
Yes.
isn't it?
I'm not certain. I'm sure of that.
And if, for the sake of argument, you had identified in the course of your function as the finance department, something in a banking context that appeared to be suspicious, what was the procedure, to your knowledge, for reporting a suspicious matter in those circumstances?
I'm not familiar with any procedure.
Is the effect of that answer that, as far as you are aware, and I'm now talking about the period 2013 to 2020, there wasn't a specific procedure for the finance department to make suspicious matter reports?
And that's right. It was not our function, our core function, to review the bank statements for unusual activity.
Well, I'm just now referring to, notwithstanding it may not have been in your function to review for any activity. If activity came to your attention, by whatever means, by what process were you to make a suspicious matter report if you chose to do so?
I'll just add some context to
Sure.
the comment. Firstly, we'd have to have the training to determine if a matter did look suspicious, which is via the online training. And at the time, prior to December 20, I cannot recall the method that we needed to use to report a suspicious matter.
What's the method now?
So the method now is a UAR, unusual activity request, which is I believe there's a portal which you could request that.
When you say you believe, have you operated the portal to see how it works?
No, I've not been into the portal.
All right, so there's a portal, and prior to that, what's the best of your recollection? By what means would a person who thought something suspicious was taking place have brought that to the attention of Austrac?
Was suggested speak to the AML officer.
And when you say the AML officer, do you mean at the relevant time, not the chief, not the compliance officer, not Mr. Preston, but the person who held the office of AML officer?
That would be my understanding, yes.
Can I wish to just, you were obviously aware that the CBA ultimately did close the Riverbank Investments account in 2019,
Yes.
and you received an email to that effect. I'll just take you to it. It's CRL.605.016.7020. And I just want to ask you a question about the paragraph that begins, "We are working with our relationship banks to attempt to open new patron accounts." Can you tell the Commission what your understanding of what steps were being taken to open new patron accounts were in October 2019?
Not familiar with the steps to open new bank accounts.
All right. Did you have an understanding of what was intended in 2019 in respect of patron accounts?
No.
Did you understand in 2019 them to include patron accounts for Riverbank Investments?
Sorry, can you...
The reference in this email to opening new patron accounts, did you understand that in 2019 to be a reference to patron accounts for Riverbank Investments?
Don't recall.
Well, Riverbank Investments accounts had been closed.
Yes.
Did you understand this to be a reference to opening new patron accounts for Riverbank Investments?
No, I don't recall.
Were new accounts open for Riverbank Investments?
No, I don't believe so.
And do you know the reason they were not opened?
No, I don't recall directly.
Well, this was 2019. We're not talking about a long time ago.
No. I believe a decision was made not to open any further Riverbank accounts.
And who do you believe made that decision?
Don't recall who made
What's
that
the basis
decision.
of your belief then?
Because nothing was opened subsequently.
I see. Were you in contact with any banks yourself in an attempt to open accounts?
No.
All right. Can I ask, if we go back to, Ms. Kessel, to your witness statement, and for this task, we may need to do a little bit of juggling, operator, of the document I referred to earlier, which is PCRC .0001, .0002, .0001, which is the list of topics, because your statement gives the answers but not the questions, so
Sure.
we need to So if we could scroll on the right-hand side. Sorry, I think if it's possible, operator, to put up both the statement on the left-hand side and the question. Oh, I see you've done it the other way around. That's fine. So with the topics, can we scroll to topic question 6, which is on pinpoint? Well done. Thank you. So I'll I want to come back to question 6. So question 7. Now in the answer to question 7, so question 7 is dealing with whether or not there are any systems, policies and procedures for the identification and management of the risks of miscalculation of casino taxable revenue payable. And in your answer you have set out, if you like, a description of the process that is undertaken to calculate the casino tax. My question really is that intended to address the substance of the question, which is there a system, policy and procedure for the identification and management of the risk of miscalculation? So for instance, you've described how it's calculated, but how do you identify if it's been miscalculated, if at all?
With the checks and balances in place, as stated in my document, and also reconciliation processes completed.
I see. So I was simply asking, this is simply for clarification, so the point that you're making in those paragraphs is you're essentially saying that the system and process has in place a number of checks and balances within it, and that's the defence against miscalculation.
Yes.
If I could put it that way. Okay. Now, can I ask you, we turn now to question 8. Now, there are some aspects of this that I think we need, first of all, to establish what a common ground of what we're talking about, actually, because it may be the questions could have been more tightly drafted for you. So, if we look at topic 8, and it asks about the nature and type of deductions used to calculate all sums paid out as winnings, and you'll understand that's part of the deductional process for the calculation of casino tax. And then it gives a number of includings, and in your statement you have addressed directly the includings, but have not said anything more about the nature and type of deductions used to calculate sums paid out as winnings. So if you just hold that thought for a moment, because I'll come back to that. There's also a reference towards the in D to bonus jackpots, and you have made specific reference in your answer to your knowledge during the period of your employment, jackpot payments, including bonus jackpots and random prizes and time-based gaming events, have been treated as deductions. So I just want to ensure that we all understand what you mean by bonus jackpots. That's my first question. So what in your mind is a bonus jackpot?
In answering this question, I was generalising with jackpots. So with a bonus jackpot specifically, I'm not familiar of an example of what that might be.
I see. So do we read that then as if the words including bonus jackpots were not in paragraph 26? Because you don't have in your mind a view of what a bonus jackpot is.
No, but any jackpot from a gaming activity would be classed as a deduction. Some receipts as winnings.
All right. So it might help to start, I guess, by identifying what kinds of jackpots are offered by Crown Perth then. So do you have knowledge of the categories of jackpots that are provided as part of the incentives or promotions as part of the gaming activities at Perth Casino?
No, not a full knowledge, no.
So then, in the process then of calculating the taxable casino tax, how do you then identify if a matter is to be included as a deduction or not, if you have no appreciation of what the bonuses or the jackpots are?
Jackpots appear in the IGT system and are noted as part of the casino tax calculation.
Can I just stop you there?
Sure.
So the jackpots, let's just call them all jackpots for the time being. They're identified in the IGT advantage system. Who is the person responsible for deciding if something is going to be classified as a jackpot in that system? Is that you or someone else?
No, it's not. It's not me.
So who makes that decision?
I'm not certain. Sorry.
I see. So who decides, who's responsible, if you like, for determining the promotions that will be offered at the Perth casino from time to time? How is that determined?
I'm not sure.
All right. So when a promotion is, do you have an understanding of when a promotion is identified, how that then makes its way into an accounting process for the purposes of identifying if it should be a deduction or not?
I'm not sure.
I see. Can I put some propositions to you about general categories of promotions and see if you're familiar with those at least? And it might be easiest to start, if I could, with a letter that you were not the author of, but it might give us at least some structure to these questions. It's CRW.708.002.5692. I appreciate this letter's from a period of time in the past, but if I could just draw your attention to, there's a heading background information and a series of what I refer to as jackpot and bonus prizes that were then approved for EGMs. And there's reference there to A through to G. Are you familiar with any or all of those items that are described there?
I'm familiar with the titles of some, but I don't actually know the jackpot itself.
So are their general descriptions, are they, for kinds of jackpots?
Yes,
So carded lucky draw jackpot, do you know what that is?
not specifically, no.
Do you know how that would be reflected in the IGT advantage system?
No,
Do you know what carded lucky time jackpots are?
no,
Again, do you have any idea how that would be reflected in the IGT advantage system?
not directly, no.
Do you know who would know the answer to these questions?
No, sorry.
Who is the? Can I ask you who or what department is responsible then for setting up the accounting so that when a bonus is paid or a jackpot goes off, it's recorded in the IGT system appropriately as a deduction?
Not certain.
Not certain who
No.
that is. Oh, sorry, I've been asked again if you could speak up.
Speak up louder. Not
Okay.
certain, sorry.
Look, just for the sake of completeness, Ms. Kessler, I will go through all of these. So what about extra play bonus?
I'm familiar with the term, but I wouldn't be for sure certain, apart from exactly what that means.
Do you know if it's still offered, if that's a
I'm not sure.
lucky coin jackpots,
No,
lucky time jackpots,
no,
point play?
No,
Scheduled return play bonus?
no,
Okay, well, have you got any familiarity at all with the way in which jackpots are devised and promoted at the Perth Casino?
no.
If I put some things to you, I'll ask you some questions that you may be familiar with this. Are you familiar with the expression something like an EGM credit?
Yes,
And do you know what that would involve if it were to be some form of promotion given by Crown Perth? What's an EGM credit?
it's a bonus credit, so based on play.
Based on play. And is that something that is connected to the loyalty program?
I'm not certain.
I see. So just going back to your, I'll take you back to your statement just for a moment and look at paragraph 25A. And B.
Yep.
Are we talking about the same thing there? Are we talking there about EGM credits?
Yes, loyalty points for credits.
Is that the same concept?
I'm not certain if there's other methods to get the credit, but I know the loyalty points will provide you with a credit.
Right. So there may be other ways of gaining loyalty points to get EGM credits, but what we're talking about in 25A and B are loyalty reward points accrued, that's to say that
Yes,
by gaming turnover,
yes,
and they are not treated as deductions on your evidence.
correct.
Right. And what about something known as a time-based jackpot? Do you have a familiarity with that concept?
My understanding is within a certain time period, a jackpot would go off, and that's my understanding of that jackpot.
Okay, and is that a jackpot of the kind that is referred to then in paragraph 26 of your statement, where you say if that's a jackpot that goes off in those circumstances, then it is a deduction?
Yes,
And are you then familiar with a concept known as consolation, or no?
no,
I'll try and give you a better description because that's the only thing I've written down. It's a process known or whereby the prizes are doubled for a period of time. Is there a process of that of which you're aware?
no,
Okay. Now, are there any other jackpots of which you're aware that can be earned through gaming on an EGM? So, for example, a free room or a free parking or some food and beverage vouchers? You're nodding. Is that
yes, sorry.
is that part of the prizes that can be won on EGMs, to your knowledge?
Not to my knowledge.
All right. So how, to your knowledge, does one obtain some free accommodation or food and beverage package or whatever it might be at the Perth Casino via the gaming activity of a patron?
My understanding is that it's outside of the gaming activity. So you wouldn't, it's not going, it does not appear through the system of IGT.
So it doesn't appear in IGT Advantage. Is that what you're saying?
Yes,
And does that mean that it's on your evidence unconnected to the degree of play of the patron in order to be rewarded with some free accommodation or food and beverage or something else?
I'm not familiar with if they do receive free accommodation or food and beverage. They may receive food and beverage if they're playing within, for example, Riverside, but that would not go through as a deduction or through as a prize or.
So if a patron is, say, gaming for some length of time and turning over a significant amount of money, they may be given some accommodation or a food and beverage package based on what criteria?
I'm not familiar with any criteria.
Okay, and so is this what you, so just to be clear, is this what you're referring to in your statement in paragraph 33 and 34?
Yes.
It is, okay.
Yes.
And so I think there's a connection between those paragraphs and paragraph 27 as well. You might be able to help us with paragraph 27 because at least some people in the room have got an idea about accounting. And you may be able to assist us. You recall you've referred in 27 to an email you sent to the Gaming and Wagering Commission.
Yes.
I won't take you to the email. I want to take you to the attachments to it, which is CRW.706.005.0211.
Can I just rise at this point? I'm instructed that this document does contain patron information and commercially sensitive revenue information. If it could perhaps remain on the personal screen, not the public screen.
Yes, just take it down from the public screen, please.
Okay. Now, I just want to make sure I understand correctly the paragraph under the heading Gaming Patron Complimentary Accommodation.
Mm-hmm.
So is this an example where, is it of the circumstance you've just described where someone is provided with accommodation gratis in one of the rooms, gaming rooms? Is
Yes.
that right? Okay. Now, the hotels record the revenue for gaming patrons' accommodation under accommodation gaming. Is it the case that the room charge that would normally be paid by a person for the room is effectively recorded as revenue by the hotels?
Yes.
I see. And that is then internally charged to the gaming division in the whether it be table games or gaming machines, and reflected as a charge against their internal account, is it?
Correct.
All right. Now, no money has actually flowed into Crown at this stage, though, for that service. There's a sentence that says the revenue along with the complementary amounts will include accommodation provided at a reduced rate.
Mm-hmm.
That I don't understand. Does that mean the revenue is reflected as the full room charge, and the discount is then charged to the gaming division? Just tell me what it means. There's a sentence that says the revenue along with the complementary amounts will include accommodation provided at a reduced rate, i.e. includes amounts paid by the gaming patron. What does that mean?
So they might receive a lower accommodation rate. Say, for example, it's if you use your rewards card, you may get a discount rate, and the patron. So that's one part of it. They may be given a complimentary up to $150, and then the patron will pay the remaining amount.
I see. So the promotion may be partly paid and partly free. If it's partly paid, then you're reflecting the reduction as one of these charges to the gaming, the internal charge to the gaming. Is that the effect of it?
So the whole amount would go to hotel as revenue,
Yes.
and then the proportion that is the complementary amount, say the 150, will be charged directly to the table games expense.
I see. Now, the next sentence that talks about complementary amounts are supported by a psycho voucher or authority. That's simply the internal mechanism by which you recognise that this revenue is not really revenue. It's a gift to a patron.
Yes, it's the authority for the hotel to provide the accommodation.
The accommodation.
Yeah.
All right. So then I think I now understand. So the last sentence that says, and this general ledger line includes more than just complementary accommodation. The revenue ultimately reflects the fact or amounts that are not actually received. That's really what you're saying
Yes.
there.
Yes.
And that's borne out by when you go through all the figures in the what are the expense items to the table games, etc.
Yes.
So what I would like to understand is, given there's no income actually or no revenue actually being received by the casino or the hotels, what happens to the charge? How do you deal with that on a general ledger basis? The charge to the gaming division, table games or how do you deal with that?
Goes to their expense account. So the revenue would be one side and the expense of table games would be the other side.
So they negate,
They
knock
negate each other.
I see. And we can go through this for each of them, but I suspect it's the same answer to the same question. So then, can I take you then to the last document, which is you sent by a separate email, which is the reconciliation.
Yes.
And what perhaps is missing is that those earlier emails that earlier email and each of the attachments to it that indicate how you are accounting for these internally, is it the case there is then no connection between the charge to or the expense item and what is in the reconciliation at CRW .706.005.0233? I'll ask that again because it's not up on the screen.
Yes.
So what I'm asking is, were you conveying to the Gaming and Wagering Commission that here is the way we account for these charges internally, and those charges are not then reflected in the winnings or deductions in the reconciliation?
Correct.
I see. So again, just so I understand this, there's a table on the left-hand side, casino table revenue reconciliation, May 21. And there's a description of all the sources of revenue in the top three lines. They're coloured blue, yellow and then green. And then there's a heading, Jackpot Movements. Do I understand the jackpot movements to be, in effect, we can substitute jackpot movements for winnings in terms of the calculation of the casino tax?
Not winnings.
Not winnings? So
Oh, sorry. Yes. Sorry. Winnings.
winnings.
Yes. Sorry.
So in other words, you've got amounts coming in at the top, 32 million odd,
Yes.
and then a number for winnings, and then the revenue item is the one minus the other.
Yes.
Okay, and so in each of those jackpot items, they do not include the free accommodation, parking, or food and beverage in the other
No.
spreadsheets. I see. Just while in this document, there's a reference to escrow jackpot gaming machines. What is escrow to the mind of a lawyer? Brings to mind something that's held without there being a transaction. So what is the escrow account, or escrow mean exactly?
So it's an amount held to issue jackpots. For example, if you have a machine on the gaming floor that they're going to retire and the jackpot hasn't been issued from that machine, the amount of that jackpot needs to appear in the escrow account because it needs to, at some point, be issued as a jackpot.
I see, but in point of detail, there's been no payment to any third party by the Crown Casino at that point, has there?
That's why there's a movement in the jackpot movement. It's an accounting reconciliation.
It's a book entry, isn't it?
Yes.
So it goes from one ledger or one account to another, but at this point in time, no money has left Crown Perth, has it?
No. So can I explain a little bit?
Yes, if you can.
So for casino tax purposes, we can only deduct actual jackpots paid.
Yes.
For accounting, we will accrue the jackpots as we go along, and that's why we use the movement in the jackpot.
I see. So this is the I understand now. This is the difference between month to month, if you like, in the jackpot escrow sum. I see. Thank you for clarifying that. Now, I just want to take you back to your statement momentarily. Now, you need to bring up, sorry, operator, if you could bring back up the statement and the topics, which are PCRC .0001, .0002, .0001, and go to topic 9. And you've dealt in answer to topic 9 with this in paragraphs 27, 28 and 29 and 30, I think, of your statement. Now, in 20, we've just been through 27. That in that those documents, you are really describing interactions between you, as to say, you personally, and also Crown Perth and the GWC. So that's not really, if you like, any investigation undertaken by Crown Perth. Is it you're just simply giving some context to investigations of a general nature that have taken place into some of the topics that were dealt with in the Royal Commission in Victoria.
Yes, I felt it was, although requested, I still felt that it was an investigation in a sense to confirm.
Yeah. So in the case of paragraph 29, where you're dealing with something done with Ms. Smith, what exactly do you mean in paragraph 30, when you say you came to the view that the treatment of poker tournaments was appropriate. So what we're not really clear on, Ms. Kessel, is how you came to that view. So could I ask you, how does the casino derive revenue from poker tournaments?
There is a fee to join the poker tournament, and majority of that fee is paid out as part of the winnings of the tournament, and Crown would take an administration fee for the tournament.
So, do I understand from that description then, the fee is to participate is paid to Crown to begin with?
Yes.
The prizes from the tournament are paid out of the fees paid to enter it,
Yes.
and Crown Perth takes a commission, presumably the balance, after taking into account any other expenses from what's left. Is that the
Administration fee.
administration
Yeah,
fee?
that's my understanding.
And is the administration fee reflected in the casino tax revenue equation?
No.
I see. So the way you consider that to be not falling within the requisite definition of casino tax revenue in the state agreement.
That's my understanding, yes.
I see. And why were you satisfied by way of that process that it was not revenue to be recognised as part of the casino tax revenue?
The meeting was held with a number of people who are familiar with the poker tournaments, and all involved. And I just was a little while ago. It was just pre-COVID, and the people within the meeting felt that the administration fee should not be included in casino in the revenue. That's all I can recall.
Who were the people at the meeting?
So Angelina Bowden-Jones, Group
Yes.
Global Head of Tax, Claude Murray, Denise van der Klauw, Wayne Carey, who's in table games, Colin Lamb, who's part of my team, Ishak Atan was also at the meeting.
What about Melissa Smith?
No,
And Angelina Bowden-Jones, what's her position?
she's the Global Head of Tax,
Global Head of Tax. And is she located in Perth or in Melbourne?
Perth.
Okay, now, can I take you back to your statement in paragraph 28? And I understand, before anyone leaps to their feet, that you're claiming privilege over this report. So I'm not going to ask you to divulge any privileged communications.
Mr. Futrell, before you embark on this, we need to break, I think, for Ms. Kessel. We'll have a short break. We'll break for 10 minutes and come back at we'll break for 8 minutes and come back at 10 minutes past 4.
All rise. Rise.
Please sit down, Ms Kessel. Mr Futrell.
May it please the Commission. Ms Kessel, perhaps we could have the question rather than the answer blank to start with. If I could just go to question 9. And so I think the substance of your answer to this question is in paragraph 28, as I said. So you have indicated there that you have an understanding that Ernst & Young, or EY, has been engaged to conduct a review of Crown Perth's approach to calculating casino tax payable in relation to EGM activity. So that's EGM specific. Is that your understanding?
Yes.
And you've not seen a final version of that report? You understand it's been received, and I appreciate that privilege is being claimed over it. Have you seen a draft of that report?
Yes.
Obviously, the missing element in the question here is the outcome of that investigation, and no doubt that's the subject of the claim for privilege. So you haven't seen the final report, so I take it then you really aren't able to, we don't know one way or the other whether the outcome of that report is either the opinion of the authors of the report is that the Crown Casino's paid every cent it ought to have paid by way of casino tax, or it may not have. So you just don't know based on the final report because you haven't read it, correct?
Correct.
So if I could take you back to your answer to question 6 then. Which is a question around whether the question would be, is what we want to see, sorry, operator. The question is whether Crown Perth has paid the correct amount of casino tax revenue to the state government. The basis for your answer, which is to the best of your knowledge, it has paid the correct amount of casino tax, is that answer is absent knowledge of the final report from Ernst & Young, is it not?
Correct.
So that answer really needs to be qualified, doesn't it, by that, the fact that you don't know whether or not Ernst & Young has concluded in one way or the other as to whether or not Crown Perth has in fact paid the correct amount of casino tax, do you?
My understanding at this point in time, from what I know, I stick to my statement, I believe we have.
From what you know, but you are missing at least one piece of information, aren't you?
Correct?
So what I'm saying, suggestion to you, is that answer in 17 ought to be qualified by the extent of your knowledge, which is absent the outcome of the EY report.
That's potentially the case, yes.
So I didn't quite catch that.
Yes.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
Are there any applications? Mr Evans.
These are questions. There's just a couple of accounting issues, and I will deal with one of them. My friend Mr Sadler will deal with a couple of others, if I might. Ms Kessel, I just want to understand, and Mr Futrell took you to this, but there's a question of what's been called on a couple of occasions the Crown sweep.
Yes.
I recall Mr Futrell took you to that. I just want to understand, if I can, a live example of that, and there's a particular set of bank statements that may assist, which Mr Sadler will also, I think, ask you about. I have up GWC.0001, .0007, .0357 on room screens only? And the pinpoint is page 28. Now, you would recognise this, Ms Kessel, as the casino account for Burswood nominees. That's the principal AUD account used for casino activities.
Yes.
Now, in the usual way, that comprises a series of debits and credits. And I want to pay attention for 1 second to the credit side because it's simply the first item to see. 3 lines down, 1st of July 2019, there's an item marked credit. That's a deposit into the account. Transfer from Prosegur, collect from Prosegur. Now, Prosegur is the casino's cash handling facilities. It's a company that takes cash off the casino when the casino has surplus cash and delivers cash to the casino when required.
Correct. Yes.
So is that deposit in a sense a reciprocal of the sweep? It's a return of money into the casino account from your cash handling facility?
So it'd be money banked from the cage.
Money banked from the cage, is it?
Which goes to Prosegur and gets banked.
All right,
Yep.
thank you. I understand that. So that's a transfer of money from and to the cage. If we look at Prosegur, we'd see a cash transfer to and from the cage. So if it's cash
Yes.
going out, it's cash going out from the cage. If it's cash going in, it's cash coming into the cage. Is that right?
Yes.
All right. So if we go down a couple of, roll down that page, onto the next page. In the middle of page 29, this time it's a debit, that's a withdrawal from the account. Again, we've got a Prosegur item of 2350,000. So that's cash going out of the cage to Prosegur, is that right?
Yes.
And below that's an item of $4 million transfer to a bank account.
Yes.
Which bank account is that?
I believe that's our payments account to pay suppliers.
Right.
6697.
So that's a corporate account, effectively. You're sweeping money out of the casino account into a corporate account used for corporate purposes at that point.
No, that one's Burswood's bank account.
So it's Burswood. Okay, so it's in a sense moving funds out of the casino account to the next layer within the organisation, the local, your local corporate account. Is that right?
I wouldn't call it a layer.
Yep.
It's just basically transferring money from one of our Burswood nominees accounts to another of the Burswood nominees accounts.
But
to
not
pay
one used for
suppliers.
casino operations.
No.
No, all right, thank you. All right, thank you. I understand that. Thank you.
Ms. Adler?
Commissioner, if I may just rise briefly, I fully understand the procedures regulated by the Commission, but it seems to be unusual to have two separate counsel cross-examining the witness on one set of topics, but I am really in your hands, Commissioner.
Yeah, it is unusual, but this is an administrative inquiry and we allow some flexibility.
Grateful, Commissioner.
Thank you, Commissioners. Could we, similar topic, Ms. Kessel, could I have brought up GWC 0001 0007 0212? So this is a letter, thanks for redacting that. This is a letter sent, at least under the hand of Mr. Spence, to the department on the 7th of February 2014. At that time, I believe Mr. Spence was the CFO.
Correct.
Yes. Are you familiar with these letters?
I'm familiar with more recent letters, but yes,
letters.
I'm familiar with this.
And so you understand they're sent monthly to the department?
Yes.
And you said more recently, is there a point in time where you perhaps took over drafting them or preparing them or reviewing them?
More recently,
More
reviewing them. Very
Reviewing
recently. Yes.
Okay. So take it from that, then you didn't, or you don't recall, or you didn't draft this 2014 letter?
No.
Oh, okay. Do you know who would have drafted this letter?
not sure where it originated, but it does come from my team.
Finance team.
Yes.
You'll see there on the front cover it says at point 2. Sorry, let's bring up my version of it. Just highlighted. Yeah, at point A. Sorry, on that one, it's providing the casino account for the Hong Kong dollars. And do you understand where it says casino account there to be a casino account as required by Direction 5.1 of the Burswood Casino Directions? Or even just the Burswood Casino Directions, if not the pinpoint?
Yes, I'm familiar with.
Okay. If we could just have a look at a couple of the statements there. Can we turn to pinpoint on page 3? And this is similar to... Sorry, is this only on the room screens? I should probably not, shouldn't be on the public screen, but it doesn't look like it is. Good, okay. So this is the Burswood nominee Hong Kong dollar account. You see that at the top?
Yes.
And if we go to page 5 of this same document, you see you have Riverbank investment there, and again, it's a Hong Kong dollar account. That's in the right-hand side. But do you know why the Hong Kong dollar Riverbank account was provided?
No. My knowledge from today, I know I have been given some information as to what potentially might be included. However, I'm uncertain for sure if that's
Could
the
you tell
case.
us, you're even under the caveat of you being uncertain?
Yes. The Hong Kong dollar program, the new program implemented, where there was Hong Kong dollar chips, my understanding, that's why the Hong Kong dollar Riverbank account was included.
Accounts provided. And is this the foreign currency chip program that you refer to at paragraph 36C of your statement, I think, if we bring that, if you have it in front of you?
I don't recall referring to the program. in the
Yeah.
statement.
Foreign currency chip program, Hong Kong dollar, 36C of your witness statement.
Can I see that on the screen, please?
Coming up soon. There we are.
All right, that's part of the portal data, yes.
So they're related.
Yes.
Could you explain to the Commission what the Hong Kong, your recollection of the foreign currency chip program for the Hong Kong dollars are?
It's basically the same as AUD, it's just in Hong Kong dollars.
Do you know when that program was implemented?
I believe it was 2012.
Just bring up a document quickly. Now this document I'm about to show you, GWC 0004 0002 0012 is actually an internal department memorandum. So you wouldn't have seen this document before, it wasn't provided to you, but it does talk about the Hong Kong dollar account, so it might refresh your memory. You don't have that one? Okay, that's fine. I'll just leave that for the transcript and I'll move on. Can we please bring up GWC 0001 0007 0357? This was just up on the screen before. So here we have the same format of letter, and this one's dated 23 August 2019. Did you have a hand in drafting this letter? Or reviewing it, sorry, I think was your evidence, not drafting it.
I'm familiar with the letter, yes.
And down in the penultimate paragraph, you see a paragraph reading as discussed with Mr. Paul Hume. Could you just read that paragraph? Mr. Hume's evidence to his commission was that that paragraph was he drafted this letter and he inserted that paragraph into it after discussion between yourself, Mr. Preston and himself around that time. Do you recall that discussion?
Not directly,
Not directly.
no.
His evidence was that there was no good reason provided for why the statements hadn't been given to the department before that date. Is this ringing a bell to you, or?
Yes.
Yes. And at that point in time, had you thought of the Hong Kong dollar account, the Hong Kong dollar chips at that point in time, and did you discuss that? Do you recall, or was that there was no answer or no reason given as to why the other statements weren't provided?
I don't recall my conversation
You don't
with
recall the
Paul.
conversation? No further questions.
Thank you, Mr Sadler. Any other applications?
No, I'm fine, because
Commissioner Jenkins?
I've got a few questions. In respect to the correspondence you received in March and April 2014, that's the email correspondence about the concerns of ANZ and the Riverbank account. Do you recall whether that in any way raised concerns in your mind about whether Crown was accurately reporting to Austrac these suspicious accounts?
No, I
Or
don't.
transactions, I should say.
Sorry, no, I don't recall.
So you don't, I ask this question. After you received the 29th of April 2014 email, which was CC'd to you, which referred to suspicious transactions, multiple transactions less than $10,000, did you give any instructions to your staff in finance to make sure that those sorts of multiple transactions were not occurring or appearing in the bank statements?
I don't believe so.
If the same set of circumstances arose today, would you do anything different to what you did in 2014?
Definitely, yes. So my team would be informed, and if I personally noticed the transactions, I would report them as an unusual activity report.
And why would you do that today and not have done it in 2014?
Today we have far more knowledge on the AML requirements and more details as to how potential money laundering could occur.
Back in 2014, you understood that there was a requirement to lodge suspicious matter reports with Austrac in relation to suspicious matters. Is that right? You're nodding
Yes.
your head. You were aware that the ANZ had referred to multiple deposits in the Riverbank ANZ account on the same date for the same patron as being suspicious transactions?
I don't recall that email.
No, but that's the email you received, isn't it?
Yes, it is, but I don't recall opening it because I was already familiar with the fact that the bank was closing the account, so I might not have opened that email.
You had treasury functions, didn't you? So that you were responsible for the bank accounts that Perth Casino was operating?
Responsible for the administration side of the bank
Yes.
accounts.
So when you became aware that ANZ was closing the account, you would have wanted to know why, wouldn't you?
I don't recall asking why the accounts were closed.
That's what I'm really asking you, Ms. Kessel. If you had those responsibilities back there in 2014, still have them today, but you're saying that you didn't even follow up as to why ANZ was closing the account. What satisfaction can the Commission have that you would do that today if the same circumstances arose?
As I said, more knowledge. Back then, and it is really still now, it's not finance's responsibility to look through every transaction within the bank statement for unusual activities.
In respect of the telegraphic transfer release forms and the attachments to it, are you saying that although they come to the income control department within finance at the Perth Casino, you don't see them?
I don't see the incoming and the outgoing TTs, I personally see.
And just explain to me what the difference is. When is the incoming TT records what? So what do you say you don't see?
I don't see the one where the money from the patron hits the bank account.
No.
And Cage records. Yes, that one.
But when the patron turns up at the cage and wants release of their funds,
I don't see that one either. I only see when we pay, if we need to pay the patron their winnings or front money.
Who's the we? You say we. We have to pay. You're drawing a distinction between Cage on the one hand and finance on the other? In that
Yes,
we?
finance being we have to, on the banking system, we go in and make that transaction.
right. But if the transaction's done at the cage, then you don't see it.
No.
Do you recall having any conversation with David Brown about either the closure of the ANZ Bank in 2014 or the process of aggregation of transactions within the Riverbank account?
No, don't.
And then I just have one last series of questions about the issue of tax. And I just want to understand what this position is. The value of Crown Rewards points that are converted by patrons into extra play credits at electronic gaming machines. My understanding is that the casino does not count the value of those points, if they have a value, as taxable revenue. Is that your understanding?
Yes.
But if once converted into credits, and I understand the process of reimbursement, so I take that as read. But if a patron wins on a credit which is subsequently reimbursed by an extra play credit, the value of those winnings are deducted from revenue for the purpose of calculating tax. Is that right?
Yes, although very difficult to determine which part of play is the loyalty point or normal play, but yes,
Then when we move to the gaming table, if a patron wants to use their Crown Rewards credit to play at a table, how is that done? How do they convert their credits to chips for the purpose of gaming?
my understanding is they go to the Vic machine and receive a voucher and then go to the table, and that voucher will be given to the table, the dealer, and they'll provide a particular type of chip. I think it's called a comp chip, and that's how they'll commence their play.
So is the value of those credits taken into account as revenue for the purpose of calculating tax?
My understanding is yes.
And the value of any winnings from playing those credits is taken into account in deducting from
Yes.
revenue for the purpose of calculating tax.
That's my understanding, yes.
What then, in your understanding, is the difference? Which explains why the value of those Crown Rewards points is calculated as income for one purpose but not for on table games. Sorry, is count.
Yes.
I'll be clear. Is counted as income for the purpose if they're played at a table game, but not if they're played in an EGM.
I'm not familiar with the answer. I have asked that question myself, but I can't recall the answer to it.
And who did you ask the question of?
I can't recall, to be quite honest. Could have been either of two people, but I can't recall.
So who would they be? I'm just wondering who we might find the answer from.
I asked Isha Katan within my team, the Revenue Audit Manager, and Chris Schoenmaker from Table Games.
Thank you. Those were my questions.
Thank you. Ms. Gethin, I've got two short questions for you. I'll start with taxing. Commissioner Jenkins finished on tax. The poker tournaments.
Yes.
I understood your evidence to be that the revenue, the income, is a fee that the participants in the poker tournament pay. From that are deducted prizes and an administration fee. Is that correct?
Yes, that's my understanding,
What are
yes.
the sorts of things that go into the calculation of what the administration fee should be?
I'm not familiar enough to answer that question.
Are there any other deductions apart from the prizes and the admin fee from the
Not that I'm
From the-
aware of.
from the fee that the punters pay?
No, not that I'm aware of.
Thank you. And my last question is a very short one. You spoke about sweeping out of the Riverbank accounts from time to time. Was that done solely into another Burswood account
From the Riverbank account?
from the Riverbank account?
Yes.
So there was no sweeping done to an account outside the Crown Perth entities?
Not that I can recall, no.
All right, thank you. Anything arising, Mr. Futrell?
No.
Mr. Gandhi?
Commissioner, it's late in the evening. I just have one question that I
Certainly.
have to raise with the witness. Ms. Castle, you gave evidence to the effect that even as of now, finance is not responsible for reviewing bank statements to ascertain whether or not there is anything particularly suspicious from a money laundering perspective. Is there anyone in Crown that has that job?
Yes, so
Who's that?
Cage reviews the bank statements to determine for AML, and AML, the AML team have reviewed the bank accounts as well.
So you have at least 2 departments now that actually review the bank statements to specifically look out for suspicious transactions.
Yes.
Grateful discussion. Commissioners, I have no further questions.
Thank you very much. Ms Kessel, thank you very much for your evidence. It has helped us. And we'll leave the summons in place just in case there's any, I don't think there will be, but just in case there's any tidying up to be done. But in the meantime, you are free to go about your normal activities. And once again, we will adjourn till 10 a.m. on whatever next Tuesday is.
Oh, Tuesday, right.
All rise.
Well done.